Nobody would ever think their parents are going to kill their grandchild, Jennifer Hoffman said. It's common knowledge everywhere. Your grandchild is your child. You wouldn't want to harm them. But it was different for Layne. She shot him. And even after his 911 call, she shot him again. Jonathan Hoffman was 17 years old and a Michigan senior high school student. He had a sister named Jessica. Jonathan Hoffman's family faced significant changes in 2008 when his parents divorced. Initially, the family relocated to Arizona to stay together. However, their new life was soon disrupted when Jonathan's younger sister, Jessica, was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Jennifer, Jonathan's mother, dedicated herself to Jessica's recovery. Once Jessica's health stabilized, Jennifer visited Jonathan in Michigan. During her visit, she noticed Jonathan had started smoking marijuana. She rationalized it as a normal part of growing up, saying he was happy, but he was smoking weed. She said, "Okay, he's just growing up." Sandra Layne, 74, and her husband Fred lived in a condo in Oakland County's West Bloomfield Township. Sandra Layne is a devoted mother of 5, grandmother of 9, and former teacher. Jonathan Hoffman's life was marred by struggles with substance abuse and escalating violence. His drug use had previously resulted in a hospitalization due to overdose. Jonathan Hoffman's downward spiral began in early 2012, marked by escalating drug use and increasingly violent behavior. In March 2012, Hoffman was hospitalized after ingesting hallucinogenic mushrooms. A search of his car revealed additional drugs, leading to charges of drug possession. Another incident in early April resulted in similar charges. In the months leading up to his death, Hoffman's behavior became more erratic and aggressive. He smashed computer screens, kicked in doors, and exhibited other destructive tendencies. Jonathan Hoffman's troubles with the law continued to mount. He had been pulled over while driving and caught with marijuana, leading to a probation sentence. However, he failed to adhere to the terms of his probation. While still on probation, Hoffman was stopped again and found to be in possession of Adderall, a prescription medication typically used to treat attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. This second offense further compounded his legal issues, underscoring his ongoing struggles with substance abuse and compliance with the law. Jonathan Hoffman emerged as a troubled young man. His grandmother, Layne, described him as having anger issues, according to reporter Corey Williams. This characterization was further supported by a disturbing incident just weeks before the shooting. Layne had grown so concerned about Hoffman's erratic and out-of-control behavior that she called 911. Police intervened to de-escalate the situation. Layne took decisive action in response to Jonathan Hoffman's escalating violence. On April 18, 2012, she applied for a permit to carry a handgun, citing concerns for her safety. Just 9 days later, on April 27th, Layne purchased a 9mm Glock, motivated by fear of her grandson's increasingly threatening behavior. She said, "I was afraid of him." On May 18, 2012, a frantic 911 call captured Jonathan Hoffman's desperate pleas for help. "My grandma shot me. I'm gonna die," he exclaimed, followed by additional gunfire. Police rushed to the West Bloomfield Township, Michigan residence, where shots continued to ring out. Upon arrival, they ordered Sandra Layne to drop her firearm. Layne's stark admission, "I murdered my grandson," echoed through the scene, as recounted by prosecutor Paul Walton. Officers found Jonathan Hoffman face down, clad in gym shorts and socks, with multiple gunshot wounds and a faint pulse. He was rushed to the hospital but was pronounced dead on arrival. The investigation of the crime scene revealed a disturbing scene. Blood scattered across multiple areas of the 3-level residence. Prosecutor Paul Walton noted that 10 bullet casings were found throughout the house. She shot at him 10 times in 6 minutes and hitting him 6 times. If that didn't show intent to kill, what else would? The events unfolded unexpectedly for Fred Layne, Jonathan's grandfather. Unbeknownst to him, the tragic events were unfolding at home. Sandra Layne had instructed him to take their dog for a walk moments before the tragic event. Following her arrest, Sandra Layne was taken to the hospital for observation due to her age. In the emergency room, she initially told police that Jonathan Hoffman had not harmed her, according to journalist Ronelle Greer. After being medically cleared, Layne returned to police headquarters. Before continuing her statement, she requested legal representation from attorney Jerry Sabota. Layne's account then shifted. She claimed there had been a dispute with Jonathan, alleging he threatened her and kicked her in the abdomen, as reported by Corey Williams. Fearing for her life and safety, Layne stated she retrieved her gun, Williams noted. This revised narrative introduced a new dynamic to the investigation, highlighting potential self-defense claims. The autopsy revealed Jonathan Hoffman suffered 6 gunshot wounds, with 2 of those shots hitting him in the back. Prosecutors noted that despite Layne's claims of self-defense, there was no evidence of physical harm or injuries inflicted on her by Hoffman. Jonathan Hoffman's mother, Jennifer, painted a stark picture of her highly dysfunctional family to investigators. She described her mother, Sandra Layne, as argumentative, controlling, and physically abusive, revealing a history of tumultuous relationships. Jennifer's childhood was marked by abandonment when her father left home without returning. A brief respite came when her mother remarried, but the tranquility was short-lived. Tensions reignited when Jennifer had children of her own, and Sandra's contentious behavior resumed. Despite their differences, Jennifer acknowledged that her children, including Jonathan, held a special place in their hearts for their grandmother. This complex web of emotions and dynamics added depth to the case, highlighting the multifaceted nature of family relationships. A month after the fatal shooting, the autopsy confirmed Jonathan Hoffman's cause of death as multiple gunshot wounds, with the death officially ruled a homicide. According to Jerome Sabota, Sandra Layne's attorney, Layne had been aware of Hoffman's spice usage and had expressed concerns to his probation officer due to his erratic behavior. The prosecution charged Layne with possession of a firearm in the commission of a felony and open murder, a combined charge encompassing first- and second-degree murder. This allowed the jury to determine the appropriate degree of guilt based on the evidence presented. In March 2013, Layne's trial commenced. During the proceedings, prosecutors challenged Layne's claim of self-defense, disputing the notion of a life-or-death struggle. Paul Walton, the prosecutor, argued that Layne's instruction to her husband, Fred, to leave the house indicated a premeditated intent to harm Hoffman. Fred Layne's testimony further complicated matters. On the stand, he revealed that he had no knowledge of his wife owning a gun, raising questions about Sandra Layne's secrecy and potential motives. As the trial progressed, the jury would carefully consider the evidence to determine Layne's culpability in Jonathan Hoffman's tragic death. A chilling 911 recording captured Hoffman's desperate pleas for help as he was shot again, further intensifying the tragic nature of the incident. This evidence raised questions about the credibility of Layne's self-defense claims and pointed to a potentially more complex and disturbing scenario. Sandra Layne said she had an argument with Jonathan that escalated, claiming that he was panicked about flunking probation and demanded money and a car to leave the area. However, prosecutors challenged this narrative, pointing out that Hoffman was wearing only shorts and socks when killed, suggesting he had no intention of fleeing. Furthermore, they noted Hoffman had plans to meet a friend that night. As investigators delved into Sandra Layne's background, they uncovered a stark contrast between her past and the tragic events that unfolded. Layne's history revealed a seemingly ordinary, law-abiding citizen. Her attorney, Jerry Sabota, highlighted her unassuming profile, noting that she was a former schoolteacher and dedicated volunteer. This incongruity raised questions about what factors may have contributed to Layne's actions on that fateful day. The disparity between Layne's peaceful past and the violent incident sparked intrigue, prompting further exploration into the complexities of her relationship with Jonathan Hoffman and the events leading up to the shooting. In a poignant and emotional statement, Michael Hoffman, Jonathan's father, condemned Layne's actions. Through Assistant Prosecutor Paul Walton, he expressed his outrage, saying Layne put on her war paint and came in gunning for my boy. This powerful but heartbreaking statement highlighted the family's grief and perception of Layne's culpability. The prosecution and defense teams zeroed in on Jonathan Hoffman's chilling 911 call made at 5:27 p.m., where he desperately reported being shot. "My grandma shot me. I'm going to die. Help!" "I got shot again," Jonathan Hoffman told the dispatcher as he gasped for air. However, what followed was even more disturbing. Nearly 3 minutes elapsed before Hoffman was shot again, with the sounds of additional gunfire eerily audible in the background. This haunting timeline became a critical focal point in the trial. The 3-minute gap between the initial shot and subsequent gunfire raised pressing questions about Sandra Layne's actions and motivations. Prosecutors and defense attorneys meticulously examined the 911 call, seeking to reconstruct the sequence of events and determine whether Layne's actions were justified or unjustified. The 911 call served as a dramatic, real-time account of the tragic events, underscoring the gravity of the case. As attorneys from both sides deliberated, they had to consider the circumstances surrounding the additional shots fired after Hoffman's plea for help. The call's emotional impact weighed heavily as the court sought to unravel the complexities of the case. In a somber moment captured on the 911 recording, Sandra Layne's voice can be heard offering to get Jonathan Hoffman some water. This gesture, according to her attorney Jerry Sabota, speaks volumes about her relationship with her grandson. Sabata argued that Layne's words convey her love and concern for Hoffman, suggesting that she did not intentionally seek to harm him. However, prosecutors might counter that Layne's actions contradicted her words. Despite her offer of water, she proceeded to shoot Hoffman again, raising questions about her true intentions and state of mind. The juxtaposition of Layne's gentle words and violent actions adds complexity to the case. Prosecutor Paul Walton presented damning evidence to jurors, challenging Sandra Layne's claims of self-defense. Despite alleging fear for her safety, Layne never fled her West Bloomfield home or called for an ambulance to aid her gravely injured grandson, Jonathan Hoffman. This raised questions about the authenticity of her fears. Layne had told police that she shot Hoffman after he kicked her in the chest during a heated argument over money to flee Michigan following a failed drug test. However, Walton pointed out a glaring inconsistency. Layne never reported this alleged attack to police. Further undermining her claims, a hospital nurse examined Layne after her arrest and found no injuries. The nurse's testimony also revealed that Layne spoke lovingly about Hoffman, casting doubt on the notion that she felt threatened by him. The emotional toll on Layne's family was palpable as her husband, Fred Layne, 87, attended the trial. Overcome with grief, he began crying as he left the courtroom. During cross-examination, Sandra Layne made a startling admission. Prosecutor Paul Walton revealed that Layne claimed she grabbed the gun not out of fear, but to make Jonathan Hoffman listen. This statement contradicted her initial self-defense claim. Jessica Hoffman, Jonathan's sister, found Layne's words disturbingly violent. Additionally, Walton challenged the defense's assertion that Hoffman's spice use made him dangerous. The toxicology report showed spice was present in his urine, indicating it was not actively influencing his behavior at the time of the shooting. The prosecution's evidence painted a troubling picture, suggesting that Layne's actions may not have been justified. As the trial progressed, the jury would weigh the inconsistencies in Layne's story, the lack of physical evidence, and the devastating consequences of her actions to determine her fate. In a heartfelt closing argument, Jerome Sabota humanized Sandra Layne, depicting her as a loving grandmother driven by fear for her safety. He emphasized that Layne's actions, though tragic, stemmed from a desperate desire to protect herself from Jonathan Hoffman's increasingly erratic behavior. She killed a child she was trying to protect and tried to save. This statement highlighted the paradox at the heart of the trial, Layne's conflicting roles as both victim and perpetrator. With the phrase, "don't compound the tragedy," Sabata implored the jury to consider the nuances of the situation, urging them to weigh Layne's motivations and circumstances, rather than simply focusing on the devastating outcome. Jennifer Hoffman emotionally reflected on the milestones she would never share with her son, Jonathan, including his high school graduation and future children. She expressed with sadness that she now commemorates his birthdays at his grave. Jennifer highlighted the terror Jonathan must have experienced in his final moments, victimized by someone he trusted and loved. Prosecutors read a statement from Jonathan's father, Michael Hoffman, expressing the family's profound pain. Michael described the anguish of listening to the 911 recording, capturing the horrific moments when Layne shot his son repeatedly. "He was a gentle and loving soul," Michael said, his words filled with grief. "I miss my son every day." The heart-wrenching testimonies from Jonathan's parents humanized the victim and emphasized the devastating consequences of Sandra Layne's actions. Their pleas for justice and harsh punishment echoed through the courtroom. During the sentencing hearing, Jennifer Hoffman, Jonathan's mother and Sandra Layne's daughter, delivered an emotional and scathing statement to Judge Denise Langford Morris. "Do not show mercy," Jennifer implored. "She showed no mercy when she planned, stalked, and murdered my son in his bedroom. Sandra Layne is pure evil, and if given the opportunity, would surely kill again." Sandra Layne, sobbing and shackled, addressed the court, her words a mix of apology and justification. "I'm sorry for what I did," Layne said. "I apologize to everyone I've hurt." "Sorry is too small a word," Layne continued, deflecting responsibility and blaming Jonathan's parents for not taking him back to Arizona. She also cited his drug use as making him unmanageable for an elderly woman like herself. "I don't know what else to say." "I don't want to die in jail," Layne pleaded. The jury delivered a verdict of second-degree murder against Sandra Layne, concluding that she intended to kill or cause great bodily harm to her grandson, Jonathan Hoffman. However, they determined that the crime was not premeditated, distinguishing it from first-degree murder. Michigan's absence of the death penalty meant Layne faced a minimum sentence of 14 years in prison, with the possibility of a life term. Given Layne's advanced age, her attorney, Jerry Sabata, noted that a 14-year sentence was effectively a life sentence. The 2-week trial raised more questions than answers, particularly considering Layne's lack of prior violence. The jury weighed alternative verdicts, including voluntary and involuntary manslaughter, felony firearm charges, and acquittal. Ultimately, they also convicted Layne of using a firearm during a felony. As the verdict was delivered, Sandra Layne's demeanor shifted from composure to shock and despair. She mouthed, "Oh my God," to her lawyer, her eyes welling up with tears. Her reaction captured the stark reality of the moment, the gravity of the guilty verdict, and the devastating consequences that would follow. Layne's tears reflected a mix of emotions, shock, remorse, and perhaps a hint of self-realization. The verdict marked the end of Layne's claims of self-defense and the beginning of her accountability for Jonathan Hoffman's tragic death. Judge Denise Langford Morris brought closure to the highly publicized and emotionally charged case, sentencing Sandra Layne for the second-degree murder of her 17-year-old grandson, Jonathan Hoffman. Grandmothers are supposed to be protected, and grandmothers are supposed to protect, Judge Langford Morris emphasized, highlighting the shocking nature of the crime. Judge Denise Langford Morris handed down a sentence exceeding the recommended guidelines, reflecting the severity of Sandra Layne's crime. As the sentence was announced, Sandra Layne turned to face her daughter, Jennifer Hoffman. Jennifer responded with a wide grin and a thumbs up, conveying relief and vindication. Outside the courtroom, Jennifer addressed reporters, her emotions palpable. "Everything she said in her statement was a lie," Jennifer asserted, dismissing her mother's claims. "She is a complete narcissist and a liar." Jennifer expressed regret and introspection, wishing she had recognized the warning signs of Layne's true nature before leaving Jonathan in her care. "I wish I had seen signs of how evil she was before I left her with my son," Jennifer said, her words filled with a mix of grief, anger, and closure. Layne's actions remained incomprehensible, with many unanswered questions lingering. The judge pointedly asked why Layne didn't call the police or leave the scene instead of repeatedly shooting Jonathan. Layne, trembling in court, heard the judge's stern words. "Why did you keep shooting him, and how did you keep shooting him? You didn't have to keep shooting him." Following the sentencing, Jennifer Hoffman expressed relief and outrage outside the courtroom. "My mother is a monster who deserves to go to prison," Jennifer Hoffman stated unequivocally. She felt a sense of closure knowing Sandra Layne would no longer pose a threat to others. "I'm glad she's put away and can't do harm to anyone else," Jennifer Hoffman said. Her voice filled with emotion as she remembered her son. "He was a great kid and didn't deserve this." She said she knows her son is in heaven, a place her mother never will get to. Michael Hoffman, Jonathan's father and a lawyer, expressed elation over the verdict, feeling it vindicated his son's reputation. "It's been tarnished in a cruel way," Michael Hoffman said, highlighting the emotional toll of the ordeal. He described a complex relationship between Jonathan and Sandra Layne, who was once close to her grandson. She would cook his favorite dishes, like little bubby potatoes and brisket. However, Michael Hoffman also portrayed Sandra Layne as overly controlling and meddlesome. He believes she killed Jonathan in a desperate attempt to exert control over him. His words painted a picture of a strained family dynamic, with Sandra Layne's actions driven by a toxic desire for control. The verdict brought closure, but the emotional scars and memories of Jonathan's tragic death will forever remain. As we come to the end of this tragic story, it serves as a reminder of how family ties can sometimes twist into unexpected and heartbreaking directions. The story of Sandra Layne and her grandson Jonathan Hoffman raises complex questions about trust, protection, and the dark consequences when family conflicts escalate beyond control. It's a haunting reminder that sometimes even those closest to us can be capable of unimaginable actions. This case also poses moral questions about accountability and self-defense. How far is too far? Reflecting on this story, do you believe fear can truly drive someone to such extreme actions, or is there always a choice? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know your perspectives on these questions. And if you're captivated by stories like this, make sure to subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell. Many more real-life mysteries are waiting to be unraveled. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay curious and stay safe.